And we are honored to feature Mark Roberge. Welcome to the show. To those of you who are not familiar with Mark, Mark is an MD at Stage to Capital, the author of the Sales Acceleration Formula, a true legend who scaled HubSpot from 0 to 100 million. And he is releasing a new book. Mark, welcome to the
Hey,
show.
Julia. Long time no see. It was nice to see some old friends in the last panel too. I didn't get to say hello, but looks like you were ending a really great conversation.
Definitely, we're really excited to dive in into scaling in the agentic age. But before we do that, I just have to ask you a question that probably you get quite often. If you were to build HubSpot in the age of AI, in the agentic age, what would you do differently from the perspective of tech, processes,
Oh my
people?
gosh. There's like been 3 generations since then, Julia. I mean, like all we had when we started HubSpot was Salesforce. That's it. That was the only option. I remember like um in the first quarter, literally like I remember I was like, okay. I mean, you got to go back, Julia, for a second. People were shocked that we were even closing sales without meeting people in person. Like that's how far back it was. And like everyone was like worried about CRM adoption, CRM adoption. We can't get our field reps to do CRM adoption. And I was going to be worried about it, but because we were operating inside, it was never an issue. And all of a sudden, like that was a changed like moment that like the CRM had migrated from like this pest that my manager kept asking me to fill out that slowed me down to like really thinking about how it can speed us up. And it really, I think some of like our early work and my peers across the industry helped like set the stage for this last phase of sales tech, rev ops and sales tech enablement. I mean, like just 2 examples. Um, I remember I was like, okay, I want to track how many calls and like the results and the emails. And it was like 17 clicks in Salesforce out of the box to just log a call, log an email, and set a task for the next follow-up. And I hired a consultant for 50K to make that 2 clicks, which is essentially like SalesLoft and Outreach now. You know what I mean? So like literally that like kind of, and my peers doing the same things. And then another example was, you know, we now could record calls. That was like mind blowing for people in, like the 15 years ago or whatever. And the call recordings were too big to play on my phone. So I literally would have to buckle into a seatbelt, my laptop with a Bluetooth speaker on my drive to and from work to listen to calls. And of course that led into like, you know, uh, Gone and all these other things. So gosh, we are like a generation behind. But now, Julia, we're in the early innings of the next phase. And it's kind of a cool story because hopefully there is another or a number of late 20-year-old first time sales leaders that are tech forward that are going to write the book on this next phase and really inspire the next set of applications that dominate, which I don't even know are invented yet, to be honest. I mean, we're starting to see some signs with some of these agentic first ones. I'm not sure if they're it or not, but history says they're not, but like we just don't know. And so, like, just from the ground up, I would basically create like a sort of a mini use case or job to be done or however whatever terminology you want to make through the entire sequence of a customer journey. And then I would start thinking about what the easiest ones are to make into agentify or whatever. And that is a balance between effort and value. And that will probably be a multi-year journey, and even when we have a solution, there's a large percentage that it will be replaced in the next year or so by something that is even better. So that's a very abstract, piece, Julia, but I mean, we can get into specifics. I think obviously we're seeing just tremendous, like last year, I feel like it was the age of the agent on the engineering side. We saw tremendous step functions in the productivity of engineering teams with Cursor and Claude and some other tools. We were aggressively looking for any example in the portfolio, in our LP base, outside of our LP base, anything around go to market, and they were hard to come by. And I know we've started to see, we're hoping that this year is going to be the year. But I do think the lowest hanging fruit obviously is in some of the prospecting arenas of like ICP identification, identification of contacts, creation of personalized outreach, perhaps the orchestration of that outreach. Um, and I like I'm hoping that we're going to see more on the actual sales, like belly to belly sales piece too. Like in a having seen like 700 of these agent go-to-market agents in the last year as we evaluate them for investments, I do think like the path is probably like you have to create like real but safe sandboxes. So let me give you an example of like if the aspiration is to have an agent manage the call, then we can basically hire that agent first to like um, sit on the call as a sales engineer, right? That's pretty low risk. I'm a rep and I'm running a call. Maybe I'm a newer rep and maybe the customer asks me a question about like, do we have a case study in this area or does the product do this? Or a question that I normally wouldn't know. I'd have to note it and then go talk to a PM or something. That would be a great role for an agentic engineer that could be live on the call. And in that situation, if hallucinations were to occur, I have a human there to like stop it, right? And it's a very safe, pretty safe place for them to get at bats. If you want to go even safer, you can do it on internal training. So it's not even customer facing. But then once that happens, and many of these larger companies have so many at bats that happen quickly, you could get comfortable enough that they switch roles where the agent is running the call and the human is the engineer, half playing customer facing sales engineer and half playing like human in the loop, making sure the agent's performing well. And they could be like, logging optimizations that can be then embedded into the learning module and the algorithm to make it better and better. A quarter or two go by, and suddenly you might be comfortable let the agent do it on its own. So that's just an example of how we can get creative around an aspirational goal and a path to get there in a safe way that allows us to train them with human in the loop and to mitigate risks around customer facing situations.
So fascinating. Thank you, Mark. A huge concept in your new methodology. I don't know if it's even new, but the latest, and I believe the premise of your new book, The Science of Scaling, is timing. So when to scale and how fast.
Mhm.
What are your thoughts on the new GTM motion when scale is sort of the starting point and not the progression?
Haha, yeah. That's actually a profound question. I haven't had that much with Julia, and I'm glad you asked it because it's a very important question, and you forced me to reflect and think a lot about that as we kind of as this date approached. First off, let me just like give a little background around the work, so that the audience can kind of like have that foundation, and then we can pontificate on what changes. I'd love any if you have any ideas, Julia, and then people can send me LinkedIn's or notes, and if they have ideas too, because it's a new we're in the early ideations process. So the background on the science of scaling in and just remember, like I never aspire to write a book. I never do. It's more than like I kind of like feel like I have to. I've always looked at like my work as like serving the ecosystem. I get so many requests like this, and happy to do like serve the ecosystem and help the ecosystem. And when I left HubSpot, I joined the faculty at Harvard Business School full time to build their sales courses, which again, that was an amazing opportunity of service. And I also would get a lot of inbound requests from the VCs that backed HubSpot, like Sequoia and General Catalyst and Matrix saying, Mark, like we just did this Series A investment. Can you help them build their sales team? And I would do that as an independent board member, as an advisor. And I'd go like a day a week to these companies and like hire, like interview people. It was like really a lot of fun. And I did it for like 5 years. Some went public, some sold for 1 billion, some went bankrupt, like you know the game. And it was a fun time for me because I wasn't 80 hours a week on one startup and company. I was spread across so many. And I started to try to pattern recognize on the rocket ships versus the bankruptcies. And so many of those reflections came back to when the company at the board level decided to scale revenue and how fast. And I felt like the approach to those questions was not rigorous, especially for how important those questions were. And a lot of times they would just say, hey, listen, I was an early investor in Snowflake or HubSpot or Workday, and this is what they did in year one, two, and three, so that's what you should do too. And I know that kind of derives from the venture capital expectation for IRR and return, but like not all companies are ready for that. In fact, very few are. And some of them are, and they take off and they become data bricks, but most of them are not. And unfortunately, really good businesses, really good founding teams, and really good products are ruined because of forcing that very siloed approach. And I'm not saying like they should go slower. I'm not saying they shouldn't try to be $100 billion company. It's just that like very few just go like that. Like they have off quarters and they have to be able to recognize that. So that's really what the science of scaling is intended to do is it creates a quantitative framework for boards and founders to calculate using their data when they are ready to scale and how fast. Okay. And so just to double click into like a handful of the principles, so then we can address your question, Julie, of like, how does the post AI era like change that? And so the principles of the science of scaling are first off, you have to find product market fit, which is like very obvious. But like it provides a much more rigorous definition of product market fit, where I think a lot of founders associate product market fit with revenue and customer acquisition, and I think that's really bad. I think like it's easy to sell like ice to Eskimos, but it doesn't mean that ice has product market fit with Eskimos. It just means you know how to sell. And a lot of teams have gotten into trouble with that mindset. So I do think that you have to correlate product market fit more with customer success and retention. And you have to think about defining a leading indicator of retention based on the customer's extracted value or usage behaviors in the first month that would correlate with. So that's like point number one is like you got to find product market fit and you got to define it around your data and customer value creation. The second point is you got to then find go-to-market fit, which is like, okay, great. You have product market fit. If we sign up 10 customers this quarter, most of them are going to be successful on your product. But can you do that profitably? Does the CAC math work? Is the LTV to CAC good? Is the payback good? Is your burn ratio good? How much are you paying your reps? What's the ACV? Those are questions we shouldn't worry about during the product market fit journey because we're just trying to make the product work with the customer. But now we can't scale until we have that worked out. So we're going to go into this like process building and business model definition stage. Could take a month, could take 6 months, who knows? But we know what we're playing. And then we're going into the growth stage. And instead of doing what most people do, which is they hire like 20 reps right at the beginning of the year, we're going to establish a pacing of salespeople and monitor the product market and go-to-market fit indicators to see if we are successfully absorbing that pacing and accelerate the pacing if we are. So we might hire 2 reps a quarter for 3 quarters, and then 4 reps a quarter for 3 quarters, and then 8 reps a quarter for 3 quarters. And that's a very systematic way to create a unicorn, right? So those are the basic principles. Now, what does the AI era do to change that? I don't think it changes the premise that product market fit should be based on the success of your customers, whether that success is enabled by agents or not. So I think that's And I don't think it changes the premise that you must find go-to-market fit, which means you have to build a profitable business where the math works. I do think it could challenge the necessary sequencing. Like I really encourage people not to work on the the sales math and the compensation plan and the pricing model before you have product market fit because you might be optimizing all those things on the wrong product market combination. But because all this work is less of the work is done by humans, there might be more opportunities to like parallel process those, to some degree. Um, I also wonder if like there's been a rise of what's the uh I'm having a brain freeze here on synthetic data, which basically challenges the principle that like those companies that have access to really valuable proprietary data will be able to build a better algorithm and have a defensive moat. But people have had success with engineering their own data, synthetic data, in order to build similar models, even if they don't have the proprietary data access. So you could almost like think that people could get more clever around getting closer to their true product market fit and go to market fit formula without the like weeks and months of like human driven at bats with customers by using AI to evaluate like market signals. Okay, so that could be a potential. And then I would say like the biggest change I see is in the growth phase, the uh, the time horizon to accelerate. Because like I always like challenge my students. I'm like, okay, cool. Like you're ready to scale. You want to get from like whatever 1 million to 5 million. You're gonna hire these reps. Well, how long do you think it's gonna take? You decide to hire 3 reps right now. How long do you think that's gonna take? Not a day. Maybe if you're cooking a month. Remember, they have to quit, give 2 weeks notice. Then they have to ramp. So they have to learn your product, all this stuff. How long is that going to take? Like 3 months for a transactional business, 6 to 9 months then they have to build a pipeline, right? So it's like it's almost like a year. And with an agentic driven model, that changes a lot. No more hiring, no more ramp. And that's going to like completely change the growth formula expectation. So I don't know. Like those are some of the things I was thinking. Yeah, literally, Julia, you kind of forced me to think hard about this week for the first time. I was still like, I guess it's a little weird to come out with a book that isn't like AI first right now, but I'm only doing it because it was just something like people kept asking me to come do speeches on, and like, wow, that was like the top performing speech, and like Stanford Business School said, can we publish this? And then Wiley called it was just all like happened. And also I'm like giving all the proceeds to McLean Hospital for mental health, which is like probably one of the biggest motivators for me. Um, but I did have confidence that similar to sales acceleration formula, and you pointed that out in your nice note last week. I do think these are timeless principles, and some of the underlying mechanics may adjust a little bit or a bit with AI. Did you have other thoughts, Julia, as you like were thinking about it? I don't know.
Yeah, I had a very different experience reading your book, I think 5 years ago and now.
Yeah, and
And
just to be clear, that was the sales acceleration formula, right?
yeah,
Which is more of like an autobiography of how I use a data journal. So, but yeah, cool. Feel free to chime in on that.
I don't want to dominate the 9 minutes we have here, but yeah, I'm first of all really fascinating to hear your growth formula in the agentic age. If you have a minute and can do some sequel on the book or I don't know, LinkedIn post, more events, that would be really great. And
Okay.
Mark, I would love to address the ethics of scaling. I know you mentioned in some
Oh yeah,
podcasts
yeah.
um, as of late. I think in actually Zoom Info, they have James Roth here. Um, and yeah, we have a lot of, I don't know, like really wild news in the industry with 11x
Yeah.
and others. So you mentioned that GTM will be always based on customer success and
Yeah.
obviously retention, adoption. So with this comes generally like the challenge of what's the ethics of scaling and
Yeah, sure.
growth
That's
at all
great.
costs.
That's great. Yeah, there's so I can't say that I'm an A plus student of both the deal and the 11x situations. Like some people know, a listener know more, some people probably know less. My understanding is with deal, they're accused by Rippling of um, paying someone to get a job at Rippling so that they had insider viewpoints, insider information on like how the data in the CRM and how they're going against it. And there's countersuits and all that kind of stuff. And I mean, that's just like, spying, right? I'll let the courts decide what that is. I think there's a particular legislation they're trying to point to. It does sound very sketchy to me, and does sound very unethical if the claims are true. I mean, there are smaller versions of that many people do, which some people are ethically, think it's okay, and some people not, which is the secret shopper thing. I know there was a lot of people, a lot of our competitors had friends take demos from HubSpot to see how we pitched and purposely asked, what do you think about X company to see how they position us against that? That's a common practice. And I think people are different on the different ethical bounds, but like, I think that's my perception on deal. And then 11X, I think that one was more about misrepresentations of data. I did look at the 11x deal, and it was certainly stated to me very differently than what I've been reading in the press on what their actual numbers were with churn and revenue. That does sound very fishy to me. Of course, like it's the job of the founder to sell the company, right? And to like, but there's a line, right? Like you can show a certain level of optimism, even at the street level with the public markets. They need to create an accurate one, but they also should be, oftentimes they're optimistic about things they're pursuing. But like when you tell someone that revenue is X and it's Y, like there's a line. And I'll let the courts decide. We've had some rulings in the past. Now with the aspects of scale, there's examples of like how you never want to have a business that's going to destroy society with pollution and stuff. And that's why I think a lot of technicians, including myself, have been pontificating about the economic and societal impacts of AI because we don't want to be bringing that to market if we're not feeling good about the impact. And I think that's a very separate conversation and one that I think I'm still understanding myself. Um, but with regard to scale, I do broach the ethical subject with my students because when we teach the founder selling class, we do root some of the concepts in behavioral psychology principles that I would say like this is my basic framework of how personal selling works. And it's not like I can't say it in 5 words. This is as simple as I could say it. The way that sales works, and they're coming in thinking that it's about persuasive presentations, right? So they're like way off, right? The way that sales works is step number one, it's about developing quick trust with the prospects so that you could ask open-ended questions about their perspective, their priorities, the opportunities they're pursuing, the challenges they're trying to address. And through that dialogue, you can navigate the conversation toward the area that you solved in order to explore whether or not they think that's important and how they think they're going to solve it. If they think the problem you solve is critical and they are looking for a solution, they're looking to solve it in the same way that you solve it, great. Tailor the presentation to their context so they can really connect with it and spend a lot of time with that deal because you're going to close a lot of those. If they are not in that bucket, if they are prioritizing the problem but have a different solution in mind, a different way to solve it, or they're prioritizing other problems and not yours. Then you have to ask yourself a question. And this is the ethical part. If I quit my job as my salesperson and took over their role, do I agree with their perspective? Knowing what I know about their company and their role, do they have their priorities right? And is their strategy right? And if it is, do not sell that deal. Like that's a disservice. Like recommend something that you know and ask for a referral to someone else. But if you think they're wrong, and oftentimes we're working for our company as a salesperson for a reason because we really believe in the mission. So oftentimes we do think they're wrong, then attempt to reframe their perspective so that they are prioritizing the problem you solve and they want to solve it in the way that you've envisioned. And that I'm struggling with a very rigorous framework on that. I do know that the best people I know on reframing are therapists. I'm a big therapy believer, and I can go into some therapy sessions very sad, and I walk out very happy. And all my therapist did was ask me 6 questions. That is beautiful reframing. So maybe we can like obsess over the lore of that area. But hopefully that explains the ethical element of like sales and scaling and when you want to like really reframe someone's perspective and when you want to let them just do what's right for them and their business.
This is great. It reminds me of your hiring formula.
Hmm.
Mark, we have only 1 minute here. And the last question I'd love to address is your role at stage two. What's your investment thesis in the age of AI? I don't want to sound cheesy, but I mean, obviously we're seeing the
Sure.
shift from headcounts to GPUs.
Yes.
So yeah,
Yeah. So yeah, just really quick, stage two capital, again, like something that was presented to me and was like, wow, that is what I meant to do. It's like the late Steve Jobs, you can only connect the dots looking backwards. We are the first VC firm exclusively run and backed by go-to-market leaders, the CROs, the CMOs, the CCOs, the RevOps leaders of the best tech companies out there. We have 850 of them in the network of many of the brands that you know. And we just believe that there is a important missing narrative at the board level and the cap table level of revenue expertise. Revenue is critical, the lifeblood of every organization, and we want to bring stronger expertise to make more of these startups successful. Um, so we are a seed fund. We invest when companies are between 500,000 and 1.5. We lead those rounds. We think that's an important time to impact folks. With regard to AI, we just feel like we have some investments in there. We've been very careful because we still feel like we're in signs of the hype cycle where people just don't know what a sustainable business is. We still kind of feel most of these businesses will not be able to defend themselves against either the foundational models, the large incumbents, or future AI attackers. So we have to be very crystal clear around what the sustainable moat is as foundational models put pressure on integrating up into their application use case, and as the incumbents get more aggressive around building it into their platforms. So we're very rigorous around that. The tricky thing with that is oftentimes the vision behind that moat, the tech and the market's not ready for it. I think the classic example is Amazon back in the internet days. Bezos set out to sell everything online, but didn't start there because we weren't ready. He started with books because people were ready for that. And that allowed him to build his moat of a decentralized warehousing and delivery mechanism. So that it's those types of like really precise entrepreneurial vision and execution where you can print money and acquire customers today while at the same time building your sustainable moat of the future. And we're over by a minute. You can Google. I wrote some articles about that, about what some of those sustainable moats are. They're on my LinkedIn that I think are new in the AI era.
thank you so much, Mark. Huge honor hosting you. And I guess the really last question is, when's the pre-order of your book going to be up?
I don't know. I'm supposed to deliver it in June, and then we have to go through the whole editing thing. I think the goal is try to get it for Q4 so we can like take advantage of the holiday season. So I'm busting my hump to try to hit that. So we'll see.
Awesome. Keep us posted.
Uh,
Happy to spread in the community. And we are transitioning to our next session.